Today we call upon our local postal service employee to bring unto us, the mail. And I'm trying to get used to wearing these really bad aftermarket earbuds again. And so you guys will just watch them fall out of my ears all show long. I am, of course, joined today. Watch the animation here. Ta-da. I'm also a little bit delirious, apparently, by my good buddy, Adam King. Kingy, as it says there on the screen. He's at Adam King 91 over on the socials. Good morning, bud. You okay over there? You look like you're sort of really still trying to wipe the sleep out. Sometimes you come on at an early hour and you look like you're raring to go. Today, you look like you need a little more coffee. I mean,
yeah, I think so. It's been very hot here, so sleeping is sort of tough. But then last night, I don't think it was as bad, and it's also raining, so I always sleep a lot better when it rains, and it's harder for me to get up. So
yeah, you're deep in the blanket this morning.
Yeah,
I gotta try to make a reference to that at some point during the show. What we've got cooking today. First of all, you can find me on Twitter at Dan Bespris. Both of us are on the brand new Blue Sky. I'm Old Man Squad over there. I think you're Adam King 91 over there as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram if you want to drop a follow on any of those guys. Like, rate, subscribe. You guys know the drill on that front. And because I know for a fact I'm going to forget to do this later, friends, this Thanksgiving holiday, why not head to the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting? That, of course, is Bet Online. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with constant real-time odds and action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football to NBA to college basketball to NHL to UFC and boxing, head to their website today to see why Bet Online is America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. Adam and I have each selected 3 favorites from the mailbag, and the questions were quite good this week. You and I were both sort of perusing them, and, of the 30 or 40 that got submitted, there were a lot that were more in that kind of macro type question. Because that to me, and I know you agree on this one, like, while we'd love to get to everything, and those of you that asked the question of like, oh, this is the last guy on my bench, should I drop him for player X? We're not going to get to those questions. We got to try to do the ones that are going to be broadly applicable. And so Adam and I each picked 3 that we wanted to go over. You are the guest, good sir. So I guess we can kind of snake draft our way through this thing. Round 1, pick 1. Adam, where do you want to start?
As I remind myself of what I picked, let's go with, let's start with the first one that I sent you. Have you got them ready to put up on the screen?
I do. I think this one was from Brandon, right?
Yes.
And now we can get that up there. And babamo.
Cool. So, so as you said, we did try to go broad. So at this point in the season, what would you try to do if your team is underperforming, which I think is the case for a lot of teams? Assume the projections will correct. Eventually, swing trades, stream. So I guess it's more of a general kind of a strategy kind of question. And I am in this boat in a few leagues, so I can relate. And it's I don't know. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I think maybe it makes sense to answer our own question, and then we'll pass it off, and then you can give it to me. And after I go, I can just segue into my first question after that or something. So, what do you do if we're 4.5-ish, 5 weeks in, and how do you assess a team? Because you don't want to just throw in the towel. That would be crazy this early in the year.
It would. So I'm just going to pull up a league that I know is relevant to this question, one of my leagues, and it is a league that I'm in with you, and it is the Old Man Squad Contributor League, because I am dead last in that league by quite a bit as well. It has been pretty rough going thus far. And it's one of those situations where I go and I look at my team, and I actually don't mind my team. I look at the players, I go, I've got a good roster here. I don't really understand what's going on.
That's a weird thing.
So initially for me, I look at, I think injuries is the obvious one. So have a look at how many games total has your team played, but also how many games total have your main guys played? Because if you've been streaming in, your total games played are probably going to look okay, but you've been playing guys like, I don't know, Anthony Black and Ben Simmons, and these guys who are racking up games played, but not necessarily racking up the game stats. So have a look at games played of those players that you drafted with a specific strategy in mind. So in my case, in this team here, I have Zion Williamson. He has barely played this season. Yeah. I have Ja Morant. He has barely played this season. I have Isaiah Hartenstein, who has barely played this season.
Mm-hmm.
Wembanyama, who, look, let's be honest, he was a little bit underwhelming to start the season. He was still doing stuff, but probably not to the point that we were expecting, and he's then missed a week and come back. So in that league specifically, I have a lot of my top guys, Zion, Hartenstein, Wembanyama, Ja Morant. So they're probably 4 of my top 6 picks.
So in a league like that, it sounds like then you'd be preaching another week, 2 weeks of patience, really. Although Zion, he may not show for a while. So how do you deal with then kind of being in a little bit of a hole for whatever reason, whether it's injury, because that's probably the most likely one, or if the draft just doesn't go well, do you try to change the way you build your team? Because like there are a few paths you could go down. Discussing head to head more so than Roto here. Do you try to like lean into a 6-3 win every week? Because if you lean into a 5-4 and you're already behind in the standings, it's hard to make up ground. It's a really difficult spot to be in. So how do you kind of counterbalance that a little?
Yeah, I think ideally you don't want to get to a point where you're saying, okay, I think I can probably only win 4 categories this week, so I'm going to lean into those 4. And rather than taking the overall win, I'm just going to win as many categories to try and stay in touch. Because remember, league settings obviously would come into this, but remember, you don't need to finish first. You only need to finish potentially 8th. And so if I am to look at the standings in that league, as I said, I am dead last, but I'm not out of sort of the realms of possibility of getting into 8th, and have a look at each week. Like each week is going to be very different. I always go and look at, and I don't think you can do this as well on Yahoo, but on Fantrax you can go, if you go and look at your standings and then look at the season stats. I always look at the season stats and have a look either at the Roto standings, even if it's a head-to-head league, but look at the actual stat totals and just sort every column, just sort by points, sort by threes, sort by free throws. Have a look at where you're competitive, have a look at where you're not. And I'm dead last in a couple of categories. And basically, like for me, 3-pointers, I'm 230 3-pointers behind the leader already.
That's probably not happening.
I'm not coming back in threes. I'm not coming back in free throws. So have a look at where you're moderately competitive. So like rebounds, I'm second. Okay, well, I'm going to really lean into rebounds. Likewise, I'm really good at blocks, and I've got Wemby, so I should be. I will lean into blocks. Steals, I'm fourth. I'm going to lean into steals. So figure out what categories are your strengths and really lean hard into those, because chances of you winning 7-2, 8-1 are probably pretty low at this point. So I would lean into your strengths quite hard. And if that is by streaming, then by all means go and do it. But that would depend on the depth of your league. I'm in some 16-team leagues this year, and the waivers are very thin. There's not a lot. Yeah. So if you can stream, but then again, have a look at a trade. Like now is the time to be trading. I think there are some people panicking. Maybe you can snap up someone who's underperforming. So I think there's a few different strategies in terms of what you could do. But for me, it's really leaning into my strengths and just trying to stay in touch with the top 6 or top 8, whatever your settings might be.
Yeah, I'm in And I'll agree with you almost in the reverse order. Like for me, most of my teams are doing pretty well so far. I don't have a lot of big time fail teams. The one out of the 10 cash Yahoo teams that I'm thinking about, there's only like 2 or 3 of them are head to head. Everybody knows I tend to lean into Roto a little bit more. One of the head to head teams is doing kind of fine. It's 24-21. It's in 5th place. It's not going great, but I'm in the mix. That team's been without Kevin Durant for 2 weeks. Tyrese Halliburton was my first rounder there. He obviously got off to a really poor start. He's been playing better the last little bit and better at home. So like I'm looking at that team and going, okay, I'm 3 games over 500 and I'm in the mix and my top 2 guys are either injured or underperforming. I think I'm in pretty good shape. So that's a team where I can look at it and very clearly say, I got to just sit on this club right now. I think it's going to be fine because I have Jalen Williams, who I got in the 3rd or 4th round, and he's a first rounder. Like, I have Adam King's prodigal, or like actually my perhaps real life son, Dyson Daniels, on that team, drafted super late, and he's a 2nd rounder. I think that team's going to be fine. I just need Halliburton to perform, and I need Kevin Durant to be on his feet. So that's one where I would like if you can look at your team and you can say, oh, just like hang in there, like you were talking about, and then get the pieces back. Great. The other one, I'm thinking about one of my Roto teams. I had a Harden Embiid start to that team, and this was before things got worse for Joel. And I still, by the way, I know as harebrained as it sounds, I think if you can trade for him with like a top 50 guy, you do it. But of course, I took him in the 2nd round in this draft. Looking back, that's obviously a bad decision. That's a team where it's like, okay, it's Roto, so I'm not losing the games played necessarily, but I need my top guys to be upright and dominant, or it doesn't matter how good the rest of the draft is. I'm not going to be able to overtake these other clubs. So that's one on the Roto side where I'm going to look to say, okay, is there something my team is going to be really, really bad at if I don't get as much as I expected out of Harden and Embiid? And is there a way for my team to come back or compete for a top 3, maybe not number 1? Let's say Harden continues to be this bad at field goal percent all season long. I think it'll probably get a little better, but who knows? Could I turn that Roto team into kind of a punt field goal sort of build? And so you look for these little weird avenues. But overall, patience is a big one. Staying in contact is a big one, like you said. And then head to head, if you don't think your guys are coming back, like the one I just talked about, I think my guys are Halliburton's coming around and KD's playing tonight. That one's just patience. If it's not, then yeah, you do have to kind of lean into maybe a slight shift in the build. All right, let's segue to my first question, and we'll go stashes. This is an interesting one. Could you rank your best stashes for late season? I don't know about ranking necessarily, but this one is at Martinez Pitch. Says, what about rookies like Zach Edey, Alex Sarr, Stephon Castle? I did a show last week where I kind of got started on the idea of stashes, and everybody that knows me knows that I prefer not to stash guys particularly early. But a couple of names that I like in this one of them is Sarr, who this gentleman, I think it's gentleman, suggested. I think Alex Sarr has that sort of unlimited potential kind of fantasy game where he can steals, blocks, boards, scoring. And right now he's just shooting 36%. Like there's the rookie thing staring you right in the face. And I know he got a concussion yesterday, but Robert Williams is actually one of my favorite stashes this year for the possibility he gets moved to a place where he'll get 20 minutes consistently. Edey, I think, is maybe slightly better than a stash because he was drafted with the expectation he would be doing things, just to sort of address this one. But then I tend to shy away, Adam, from guys that are more like the Stephon Castles, who's extremely exciting right now, but not nearly as good for Roto as he is for head-to-head, because he's a guy where you probably need to be punting something to survive to the point later in the year where you hope things kind of get ratcheted up a click. So for me, I like Alex Sarr a lot. You could throw Donovan Clingan in that mix as another Portland center to hang on to because he'll probably do enough even in the near term. So 2 Portland centers, 3 centers overall. Those are probably my 3 preferred stashes. What about you?
Yeah, stash is an interesting term that we hear in fantasy because for me, a stash is someone that that isn't performing now. Like a stash is someone that isn't necessarily viewed as a must roster player right now. And like you said, I think Sarr sort of is. Like, even though he's not shooting the ball well, he is getting blocks, he's getting rebounds, he's doing enough to put up standard league value. Same with Zach Edey. So I guess if I was going to think of who am I stashing, it's players that maybe we were high on them to start the season, maybe we weren't. But their role, like they're on a team that will provide them the opportunity for their role to change come February or something like that. So we're looking at your Portland, Brooklyn, Washington, Utah, those teams that are pretty bad. That's where I would sort of start, not as a rule necessarily, but just as an easy way of finding them. Right. Noah Clowney comes to mind. So I think we were relatively sort of excited about him. We thought, he's going to have a significant enough role here that he might be worth drafting, and a lot of people did draft him, and it didn't work out because he hasn't played huge minutes. He's looked pretty good. He's now injured, but someone like a Noah Clowney for me would be top of the list. And then if we go into Portland, you mentioned Robert Williams for the fact that he could be traded at some point. I would sort of say Donovan Clingan, although the DeAndre Ayton mysterious finger injury has opened up a role for him probably ahead of time. Mm-hmm. If Ayton had been healthy, I think Clingan would be on this list because he wouldn't be rostered in as many leagues. But I like him, and I like someone like, if we go into, I don't know, who else did I said Washington. If we go into Washington, it might be, and this is another little sort of a weird situation, Bob Carrington, who was a rosterable guy and he's probably trending towards being a drop now because Malcolm Brogdon time apparently, for whatever reason, Malcolm Brogdon is playing all these minutes. So Bob Carrington is probably going to be dropped in a lot of leagues. He is someone I would be picking up because, and we don't know what these teams are going to do, but common sense would tell us that they will lean into Bob Carrington at some point to see if he is part of their future. So that's sort of where I'd be looking, I guess. That's a couple of names, but I'd be looking at teams that we project to be bottom 4, bottom 6.
Yeah. People love a good stash, man. This is like, once mock drafts are over, I don't think anybody loves, like, that's the public loves the stash. And it's funny that you and I kind of think about stashes very differently. I'm so bent on getting off to a good start that I can't even fathom the idea of having a player that I don't have any desire of using in the near term if they're healthy. Like, injury stash is, I guess, a little bit of a different thing, and depending on league settings, you might see those guys pop up. But yeah, for me, like, I gotta have active stash or I can't even do it. Adam, where do you want to go next? You got 2 more. Flip
I do have 2 more. Where are we? All right, let's go with let's just go with the second one that I sent. So that was from, is it Sayman?
All right, I can pull that one up.
You can pull that one up.
1, 2, 3, and bingo.
Yeah, there we go. So who are our favorite breakout players and disappointments? Well, breakout for me,
yeah, I know where you're going.
That's why I picked this one, because it's nice and easy for me. I'm going to go Dyson Daniels, of course, because even though I was high on him, he has exceeded my expectations, obviously. And I think a really good example was he had a couple of 0 steal games, and then everyone was just in a flap about, this guy, he's overrated. Why have we been adding him? If we look at his performance yesterday, he had where's his game log? So he had
2, right?
2 and 2, and I think it's at the point now where people look at that and go, it's fine, it's not great, but it's actually incredible. Like, 4 defensive stats, 17 points, he hit his free throws, he hit threes. So where he's very sort of quickly transitioned into a player where a bad game for him is not actually a bad game. If we'd looked at that game last year, people would have been jumping out of their shorts to go and pick him up everywhere. So Dyson Daniels is my favorite breakout player. And who is yours?
So if you hadn't picked him, I would have also picked Dyson Daniels. For me, it's a split decision between Tari Eason and Cam Johnson. They've both been really, really good. Eason in 23 minutes a game is actually a lot like Dyson Daniels. He's at 3.3 combined defensive stats, 12 points, 6.5 rebounds. Tari's been insane coming off that Houston bench. And then aggressive iteration Cam Johnson is at very close, I think, right now to 50, 40, 90 splits, if I'm not mistaken. So that's that. Like, who was the last player to do it? Did Chris Middleton get there, or was he just really, really close? And then Brogdon was pretty close before that. Cam Johnson is at 49.8% shooting, and I know he tweaked an ankle yesterday, so hopefully that's a short thing. 43 from three-point land and 90.6 from the free throw line. So he is 0.2 of a percentage point away from being a 50, 40, 90 guy. This is what we wanted last year out of Cam Johnson, which was get in there, take frickin' shots. Because when he took shots in Phoenix, he was awesome. His fantasy game translates really well when you can be a guy who hits a lot of three-pointers and do it at a good efficiency clip. That makes you kind of a rare commodity, because most of the guys that knock down a ton of threes sag your field goal percent, other than, the dudes in the first and second round. So if not Dyson Daniels, for me, it's either Cam Johnson or Tari Eason. My disappointment so far, and then I know we can come back to you on this one. I'm so sad. I want to get it off my chest. Is what the Lakers have done to poor D'Angelo Russell. It was Alex Caruso to start the year, because he just has no role on that Oklahoma City team, and that was extremely surprising. With D'Lo, and I watch most Laker games because I'd like to say I cover them. I cover them in my head, and if I'm reading it, then I'm excited about it. It's not going to last, but I also realize that he's unrosterable the way he's playing right now. He's just floating off his own little universe, and the Lakers are doing the thing that they did to him last year, which was like, if you're not going to fit right, we're going to ruin your day-to-day until you figure out how to fit right. But that one's a tough one. That's a really tough one to sit through, even though we know at some point he's coming out the other end, whether it's with the Lakers or with some other team. He's not going to be having this 19-minute role all year, because he's just too good offensively for that. But he's not making his shots. He's making bad decisions, and he's not good defensively to begin with. So if the offense isn't there, and the defense isn't there, they don't really have any choice but to continue to pull him back. Who's your big disappointment so far?
Russell is definitely in the discussion. He was someone that was probably on my list there. I'll probably go, and I mean, we could include like a Joel Embiid here, or Zion, like injury related disappointment. Embiid, I'm not going to say, because I had no faith in him anyway, so I wouldn't call him a disappointment, because I was planning to be disappointed. So I might go with. There's a few names I was tossing up here, but I might go with Jalen Duren. I think, just because I was relatively high on him. I was okay sort of taking him in that 6th round range, the top 60. And he's just been very I don't know. To me, he hasn't even taken, not that he hasn't taken any steps forward, but he's potentially taken some steps back. And that could be a little bit to do with the fact that the Pistons are better and have a better supporting cast. I thought yesterday he looked okay. He had a decent game yesterday, but the fact he's splitting minutes with Isaiah Stewart is not a good sign, because I don't think Isaiah Stewart is that good a player. He has been good this year, don't get me wrong. But yeah, I think for me it's probably Jalen Duren, and then closely followed by maybe Josh Giddey. We'll go with a good Australian, Dyson Daniels, and then an Australian who has been a little bit underwhelming in
appreciate
Josh
you
Giddey.
Staying close to home with your picks here. That's nice.
Yeah. So I think they're probably two, but I mean there have been quite a few.
Yeah, that's fair. And I tried to pick an American breakout and an American disappointment. This show's taking an odd twist. All right, let's see. Where am I going next? How about this one from Ning? Hi, Dan. I would like to ask a question. That's fair. That is what this is about. Mid-season adjustments on punting strategy, and I thought you might be a good person to talk to about this as well. A month into the season, asks Ning, are you more likely to lean further into a punt or become a bit more balanced? What kind of factors go into your decision? I'll talk through my own strategy on this one as someone who plays more roto than head to head. For head to head, well, for head to head, the only time I would look to be more balanced is if I totally whacked out what I thought I was punting on draft day, and like I picked someone that I thought was this obvious punt build guy, and they turn out not to be, or vice versa. I picked someone that I didn't think that turned into one, and that would be the kind of factor that would create that decision. For roto, this early, I'm not making a strong pivot. I'm probably about 2 to 3 weeks away. Mid-December is my time in roto where I start to look and say, okay, like I've had my guys. Where am I dead last, second to last, or third to last? And you also have to adjust for games played, because if you're in a games cap format in roto, you might have fewer games played than another team. You might not actually be third from the bottom. You might be fifth from the bottom if that stuff leveled off. So there's a few other things to look at on the roto side. If you really truly are second or third or worse from the bottom in roto, you probably lean into a new punt in that category. Hopefully it's the only category you're punting. In head-to-head, hopefully you were planning on being near the bottom in that category, but maybe you figured out that you were fourth from the bottom, and it does give you an opportunity to say, you know what, like, what if I win this category half the time? So I think there's a lot of nuance there, as opposed to just like, oh, this is the time to punt, this is the time to not. And a lot of it in my mind, Adam, comes down to, you know, how wrong did we get a projection on draft night, and how that creates maybe a slightly different build than what we intended partway through. Again, talking to the great Adam King, 91 here on today's mailbag show. You are a multi-punt guy. So what do you do in this type of instance? Because you probably can't add more things to punt if you're already punting 4. What happens if something turns out to be better or worse than you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on a question like this, and that's why I didn't put it in. I figured you might.
My bad.
So no, look, it's I'll sort of discuss this more from a head-to-head perspective, because that's generally what I play. So again, I first thing I always do is look at the standings. Every week I look at the standings and I sort each category or each statistic, and have a look at not only for the season as a whole, but for that week. Have a look at that week. It's just, I mean, we're still at a point in the season, I think, where sample size is small enough that some there'll be some outliers. And so, like, I'm just, for example, I've pulled up here steals leaders for the season. So having a look at your team, and if you drafted someone with the expectation that they're going to get you 1.6 steals or 1.5 steals, and they're getting 0.8, something like that, then yes, it's about trusting the projections and thinking this is going to rectify itself. But also have a look at your opponent. Like if we're just sort of narrowing this to the most recent week and the matchup that you were in, have a look at who they had on their team. Like, were there outliers? Was there someone who just shot the lights out and went 60% from the field on high volume, which isn't really going to happen? So it's not only looking at your team, it's having a look at other teams. Jordan Poole is currently 5th in the league in steals. Is that going to stick? It feels unlikely based on what we've seen for, I don't know, how many years has he been in the league? 4 or something, 4 or 5. But I'm going to take that sample size over a 15-game sample size. But so a league that, so I mean, I guess to answer the question, I would really dig into the numbers before making a decision. But I'm more than happy to just lean into the punt even more, stream, trade, that sort of thing. But something that while you were talking, I sort of thought of this, and I set up a league this year, which I don't think you're in, Dan. It's a roto head-to-head sort of hybrid trial league.
Right.
So it's an industry one, and the difference, it is a head-to-head league, but the difference is you play every team every week. So we're in 11 matchups a week, playing exactly the same team every week, and it's a really, really good demonstration of how values and numbers fluctuate, because in theory, if I'm good in these 6 categories and I'm top, I should be winning all my matchups 6-3 or 5-4. But that has not been the case at all. And there are some teams where I will beat them 7-2 one week, and then I lose 3-6, and then I win 5-4. So it's a really good example of how stats can change.
But it's really cool though, because you get the larger sample size where it's like, well, over the long haul, you would expect to win those 6 categories, not all the time, but more often than you lose them. And so you hope that by February, you have a winning percentage that sort of like slowly oozes its way towards what you had intended from the outset. But like in a given week now, it sounds like you've got 11 matchups, 9 categories apiece. There's 99 wins and losses up for grabs, or is it like a 1-0-0-1 type thing?
It's a 1-0, yeah. So I went to keep it, I guess, in line with more of a standard scoring format. So you don't win, like 55-44 each week. You might win 6, lose 3, that sort of thing. So, or 6 and 5, whatever. So it looks more like a standard. But I guess my thinking was that often in head-to-head, and this happens in all my leagues, my home leagues where I've got chats going, people will say, so one guy in my big money home league, it was an auction league, and he drafted Wemby, Jokic, and Halliburton. So he went really, really top heavy. And then whoever got him last week was like, well, this is the perfect time to get him because Wemby was out, Jokic was out, and Halliburton was bad. So everyone in the league is like, whoa, man, how lucky are you? You get him on this week, and then I'm going to get him when he has
all 3 of them.
Yeah. But in this format that I did, everyone benefits, because if he had these guys out, he would be playing everyone. So everyone actually gets a chance to take advantage of injuries, and vice versa. People can take advantage of yours.
Smoked for a week. That's a tough week for that too.
So that was my thinking behind that, because people always say, well, it's luck of the draw. And I thought, well, in a roto, that's not the case, because it's a season long. So that's where I was trying to sort of merge the two. But anyway, sorry, that was a long answer, but
I like it. No, that's good stuff. All right, Adam's last question. I know which one to put on because there's only one left to throw up on the screen. Here it is. All right, Kingy, what do you got?
And this one sort of links into everything we've been talking about. Do we think that generally there are overreactions on players through the first 4 weeks of the year? It seems like percentages, steals, and turnovers are highly variable to start the season before evening out. The short answer is yes. There are a ton of overreactions early in the season, and players are dropped, and that's often where you can find a lot of value, is not from chasing players that are sort of playing above themselves, but keeping an eye on the waiver wire and who is dropped. I've managed to pick up Derek Lively in 2 leagues, and that's been good because people are annoyed with the fact that his minutes are down and he's not playing well. He's been a bit injured. So I'll pick him up. I'll throw him into my team. So, yes, I do think there are overreactions, and it's because we are still only, 15 games into the season. I don't know how many it is, 18 for some teams. The variance is significant. Like if someone is averaging, I don't know, if Jordan Poole is a good example, steals, we are still at a point where, even though, if I pulled up his game log, he could go, I don't know, he could have 3 or 4 games with 0 steals, but the fact that he's had 4 or 5 games with 4 steals will almost override that. And so his
Mhm.
steal numbers will still look very good. If we were to say this in a month or 2 months' time, that won't be the case. If he has some, like his numbers will drop. It's just sample size. I did pull him up. Yeah, here we go. So his steals were, to start the season, he had 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. The last 3 games, he's had 1, 0, 0.
Yep.
But he is still fifth in the league in steals. So you're not going to notice that as much. But that will become more obvious if he has 2 weeks of averaging 0.8 steals. His numbers are going to come down. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of overreactions, and it is a really good opportunity for you to cash in on people's impatience and willingness to just drop players to pick up a hot guy who might only be good for 2 weeks. So I like doing that rather than chasing the players. I cash in on people's mistakes.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a little bit pedantic here with GT on the question. It's not that the percentages, the steals, and the turnovers are highly variable to start the season. They're just highly variable altogether. And the big issue right now is the number that everybody sees up on their screen when they're looking at a player's average happens to be the number to start the season. So as the year goes on, you'll see them level off, but they level off by continuing to be highly variable. Sometimes variable on the high side, sometimes variable on the low side. And then we see it at the end when it just looks like the midpoint, but it's this big wave up and down on the path to that midpoint. So, and again, I know I'm like parsing words here, and I know what GT meant, and this is not what this question was about. It wasn't like, oh, is it weird to start the year? It's just that this is when, like you were talking about, Adam, this is when people are seeing just that small sample size, because in January, when people sort their players on the rank board, whether it's Yahoo or Basketball Monster or whatever like page they're using to look at the ranks, most people don't look at the last 4 weeks. I do, you do, because we all want to see the trend lines of these guys. But the regular person logging in, they're just going to look at see what the player's rank is, and they're going to see the whole season overall. But if you're always looking at like the last 15 to 30 days, you're going to see these wild bounces in things. Unfortunately, because everybody doesn't, it makes it harder to pull off buy low and sell high trades as the season goes on, because you kind of going on like a gut feeling. You need some unknown to create that sensation partway through. But this was just my way of trying to add something to an answer that you gave that was 100% accurate and 100% thorough. They are very, very, very variable. And this is why you can create that. Like, this is really the time of year, the first 6 to 8 to 10 weeks ish, that you can actually fleece somebody in a trade. And sometimes you don't even have to do anything about it. I was literally driving to, where the hell was I going? I think I was driving to my kid's Little League game, and I looked at my phone, and an email popped up that someone in one of my leagues offered me Tyrese Halliburton for Jakob Pertl. And I was like, pull a car over kind of thing. I got to do something about this. Obviously, I accepted it. I know Jakob's having a great year, and their ranks were pretty similar at the time of that trade. But this is what people are looking at. They see Halliburton shooting terribly. They hear all the reports that his back is bad and he can't sleep in beds in hotels or whatever. And so people freak out. And again, if I had more time, it's the kind of thing I would be trying to exploit. Luckily, I was able to exploit it just by existing in this one. But yes, very much so is the answer to that question. And the very last question, I like to throw in one roto question because tis my cross to bear. Ben says, Dan and Roto, at this point of the season, if you're last in a particular category, is it something that you start actively targeting, or do you let things shake out a little bit more and look at potentially addressing it later in the season? Actually, Ben, and this is sadly for Adam, I'm going to keep him sidelined for a second here. If you are truly last, meaning you've accounted for a games played gap, you should give up on that category in Roto and just treat that category like a head-to-head punt. And it doesn't have to be yet, because again, we're only in the 5th week of the year or the start of the 6th or something like that. You don't have to necessarily do it yet, but I would strongly consider doing it soon. Yeah, it started the 6th week. I got that right? Yeah. Because at a certain point, you'd have to blow so many holes in the other stuff on your roster to address something that you're dead last in, that you've now cost yourself roto points sort of at large. There are little caveats. There's little potential, corollaries to that of like, oh, how far behind are you? Are there 3 teams right in front of you in something where one tiny tweak can get you 3 roto points? Then yes, try to be not the worst, be like just slightly better than not the worst. But for me, a lot of my roto teams, specifically in more competitive leagues, if I find that I'm, again, I mentioned this earlier in the show, if I'm second to the bottom, third to the bottom, or dead last, I know that the worst thing that can happen to my team there is I would lose as many as 2 roto points by giving up on that category. So if I can trade someone, and it's often guys who score for me. So if I had someone like Zach Levine on my club who's having a perfectly solid year, there's nothing wrong with him. I'm not talking about selling high or low, but he's averaging 23 points. And let's be honest, not that much else. 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 threes, I guess, is pretty good. But like most of his value is tied up in points and threes. I could potentially trade that guy for someone who is much better at steals and blocks and assists or rebounds or something like that, and try to add 3 or 4 roto points while giving up the guy who, it doesn't matter how many points I end up with. I could pick up somebody who scores 4 if I'm on my way to trying to be last in it. You're just thinking about what the ROI is on that. Adam, is there a way to tweak this question more for the head-to-head side, or not really? Because if you're dead last in something in head-to-head, you're obviously just going to punt the crap out of it. But I guess you could punt it harder, kind of in that same way.
Yeah, you could certainly punt it harder, or as we've said, if it's a couple of categories, really lean into a punt rather than 1 or 2 categories.
By the way, I'm sorry to jump in. Were you muting because the birds were going crazy? Because
I
love
was.
that.
Yep, I was. It's thousands of them out the front.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, no, look, I don't think there's a lot to add to that. I think that's, even though I'm not a roto guy, that's what I would do. I think it gets to a point where if you were to chase a category, it would be at the expense of other categories, which would potentially lift you up in that one category, but drag you down in 3 or 4, which is not what you want to be doing in roto. One thing I would just say, though, which I mean sort of links in, I guess, to a few questions that we've had, is when considering, like you said, that someone offered you Jakob Poeltl for Tyrese Halliburton. I still think that, despite the fact that we talk about it all the time, I still think people lean so heavily on ranks and top 50 player, top 80 player. And at this point in the season, these categories like steals, like the low volume categories, the percentage categories, can make someone a top 60 player when they really are not a top 60 player. And someone like an Alex Caruso last year is a good example, because I think he was a top 70 player or something, but he's not a top 70 player. No way. And people will do that. And so I know Jakob Poeltl, probably not a perfect example because he has been scoring for some reason, which is something he's never really done in his career. But his value is tied into defensive stuff. So blocks, steals, which boosts his overall rank. But if he goes, as we've said, for a week or 2 weeks where he averages 1.1 blocks and 0.8 steals, his rank probably goes from top 40 to top 80 kind of thing. So I would just sort of preach, I guess, don't necessarily look at just the player's rank. And this is, I think we're going to be doing a show, or like I get questions, I'm sure you do as well, about, is this trade a dodgy trade? And I think someone put it in one of our group chats. I think it was Robin Marks who put it in there about vetoing trades and should it be allowed and that sort of thing. And people will go, well, this guy's top 60, this guy's top 100. That's not fair. That's not the case. You need to look at it far more broadly than just a ranking.
Yep, 100%. And that brings us to the end of the program. I threw the original tweet up on the screen for those watching on YouTube just so you can see. This is what you could have responded to should you want to get in on the mix next time. That also has Adam's handle in the graphic that's up there. It's at Adam King 91, both on Twitter and on Blue Sky. Please make sure to follow both of us. I'm at Dan Vespris on Twitter, at Old Man Squad on Blue Sky. So that way you can, again, interact, follow all excellent content, and then participate if you want to get in on the next mailbag. Adam, what are you working on these days? Let's make your face a little bit bigger for the fans. And also, please tell us one fun fact about the birds outside your home.
Fun fact. Well, they're cockatoos generally.
And
Cockatoos, and I don't know. It's certain times of the day, and they come from somewhere, because there'll be none here all day, and then all of a sudden there is literally hundreds of them.
That's just terrifying.
On the power lines, on the eating in the trees. A lot of galahs as well. We get a lot of birds here, but yeah, it's. I don't know. Is that Australia? Maybe that's Australia.
Tell me about your projects going on.
My
right
projects. No, look, daily show. Most days, it's not every day, but most days, I'm getting a live sort of post-game show done at around midnight Eastern in the US. So around that time, once the games are wrapping up, we have our, sub-weekly, semi-weekly, whenever we can, we do a weekly show together. Matty G and I have a show. Well, we didn't do it last night, but we have a show, and I've got a new show maybe coming out with Noah Rubin.
Nice.
Just a weekly show. And then we will potentially be back next week. I have a very fun show in mind, but we need to work it around your schedule.
Yeah, the kids should be back in school next week, so that at least is a step in the right direction after the Thanksgiving holiday and Theodore's hernia surgery recovery. All things going well at the moment. He is at Adam King 91. Kingy, my man, it is a massive, massive pleasure. Everybody make sure to follow. And for everybody that's watching, again, I'm at Dan Vespris. This is Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. We'll be back with you again tomorrow with a Tuesday recap. Also, I think tomorrow we'll have a buy low. It might be a hot and cold show. I got to figure it out on the fly here because, again, everything kind of comes down to timing on Thanksgiving week. Hit that like button on YouTube. Subscribe, however you're taking in the content. Rate and review. Go check out Adam's pod as well, which you, by the way, you didn't give the name of. So, Adam, please give the name of the shows.
The Balls Deep podcast is my show, and it is part of the Old Man Squad network, of course.
It is indeed, and might be part of a different network in the not too distant future. There's a little tease. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday, and Adam, you have a lovely Wednesday, and I'll talk to the rest of everybody watching. I'll talk to you guys on my Wednesday and maybe your Thursdays. It doesn't matter. Goodbye, everyone.